A lot of people are upset that, maybe the biggest manifestation of Bitcoin is now going to become China's surveillance digital currency.
Yeah, so that's something that I think is really important to explain, that a lot of people conflate Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies with central bank digital currencies, and they are fundamentally different animals. So the whole point of Bitcoin is that it was created to be independent of government control. No government can shut down the Bitcoin network. No government can stop Bitcoin. This is the fundamental philosophy of Bitcoin. Central bank digital currencies, like China's on the other hand, are literally issued by central banks. They're issued by governments. So they are completely different things. And I would argue that, as you said, nearly 90 countries are exploring issuing central bank digital currencies. This makes the need for independent cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin even greater because governments cannot control them. And I think, we have a right to some sort of currency that is not controlled or issued by a government.
So let's talk about the idea that governments, China being on the leading edge of this, will sit by and allow a currency that they don't have control over, that they can't supervise, with different kinds of rules potentially, as apart from their regular sort of fiat currencies, that they're going to let that just happen. I'm skeptical that they will.
So just to tease this out a little bit, so there are two very separate things. One is Bitcoin and decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum. China is very wary of those, and China's crackdown pertains to those. But for China's central bank digital currency is a completely different thing. This is basically just a digital version of China's existing currency. It is totally different from Bitcoin. So that is something that they absolutely can control and that they can track. And so that is something that they are promoting now, apart from cryptocurrencies, which they're cracking down on, if that makes sense.
And this is
totally separate.
Yeah, the sort of irony about this creation, Emily, is that it can be used either to help anonymize, payments and money and all the rest of it, like the effort with Bitcoin, the blockchain, who knows. But in China's case, they have a very different motivation, and now they have powerful new technology to sort of help them do it. So what do you think the message is here for holders of all the other cryptos?
So, I think as we're seeing, many people kind of confuse these, right? They think oh, here's just another digital currency. How many digital currencies do we need? The rise of central bank digital currencies around the world will potentially cancel out these other cryptocurrencies. And I would argue firmly that the opposite is true. I think central bank digital currencies in some ways are the best argument for decentralized currencies like Bitcoin, because one of the problems with central bank digital currencies is that they're not necessarily private. They potentially can be tracked by governments. And Bitcoin is not perfectly private, but it's relatively private. It offers a relative degree of privacy, and there's a lot of privacy innovation happening in the cryptocurrency area. So I think as money becomes increasingly digital, people, and I'm talking about perfectly legal transactions, by the way, I'm not talking about criminal transactions. Even for example, you're paying for something that pertains to a medical purpose or something that you just don't want the government to be tracking every single transaction. I think people are going to look for more private forms of money.
Well, that was going to be my question. Why, and I'll ask it, he really just kind of answered it, I suppose. Why is that privacy so important, and who wants it? And then you raise the idea that we're not talking here, at least you're not talking about criminals trying to launder money or move money for illicit purposes. But inevitably, isn't that one of the things that appeals to criminals who are asking for ransomware, for example, in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, so they're not traceable?
Sure. You're raising an important point. And I think, a lot of regulators are nervous about cryptocurrencies for that reason, because they associate them with crime. But in some ways, it's a misconception because, first of all, Bitcoin is not completely anonymous. Bitcoin transactions are stored on a blockchain. So they can be tracked to a certain degree. It just takes time and effort and skill to track them. And, if most criminals, they would be better off using cash than cryptocurrency per se. But this question of why would I need privacy if I'm not a criminal? I mean, think about it. Would you want the government to know every single small transaction you're making? I mean, maybe it's just something, it's not necessarily because you're doing something illegal, but I think here in the United States, most Americans would not be comfortable with that, even if they are paying for perfectly legal things. They would still want a certain degree of financial privacy, even for perfectly legitimate transactions.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.